The Zorath warship filled the night sky like a dark mountain hanging above the earth. Its metal surface shimmered with strange blue lines that pulsed like veins, carrying some kind of alien energy. The sight made Ethan Cole's stomach tighten as he stood on the launch platform waiting for the boarding order. He had never left Earth before, never even been on a plane. Yet here he was, one of the few humans chosen to join the elite Zorath Space Force. He had imagined this day would feel like a dream, a step into glory. But the moment he saw the alien soldiers waiting for him inside the ship, he knew this was not going to be the story he had pictured. They were tall, sleek with skin like polished stone and eyes that glowed faintly. They looked at him the way someone might look at an old broken tool, and their mouths twisted into something that might have been a smile, or maybe just a way to show their teeth. A low murmur passed between them in a language Ethan didn't understand. But the laughter that followed needed no translation. It burned into his ears, and he felt the heat rise in his face as he walked past them, trying not to look weak. The ship's corridors were wide, but the walls seemed to close in on him every step, echoed like a drumbeat, and the air was cold and metallic, smelling of oil, and something faintly sweet like burned fruit. He was led into a large chamber where a group of alien recruits stood in perfect formation, each one armed, each one staring. At him with open amusement, the commander stepped forward, towering over Ethan, his voice deep and smooth as he spoke in flawless English, calling him soft skin and asking how long he thought he would survive out here. The room erupted with more laughter, and Ethan swallowed hard, fighting the urge to answer back. Then the commander gestured to a door at the far end of the chamber, saying the first test would begin immediately. There would be no rest, no warm welcome. The door slid open with a hiss, revealing a massive training hall filled with strange moving platforms, glowing targets, and mechanical beasts that prowled on spider-like legs. The alien recruits moved through the course with impossible speed, leaping and spinning, firing energy, weapons with perfect aim. Their bodies seemed to blur with motion when Ethan's turn came. The commander folded his arms and smirked. Ethan stepped onto the platform, his heart pounding. He tried to move quickly, but the floor tilted beneath him, sending him stumbling. One of the spider machines lunged at him, and he barely rolled aside. The alien laughter rang out again, sharp and cutting. He managed to hit one glowing target, but the recoil of the weapon nearly knocked him backward. By the time he reached the end of the course, he was panting, drenched in sweat, and humiliated. The commander stepped close, his eyes glinting, and told Ethan in a low voice that humans were slow, fragile, and good for little more than experiments. As he turned to leave, Ethan froze, catching a fragment of a conversation between two Zorath soldiers. They were speaking quietly, but the words came clear in the strange hush of the hall. Humans were nothing but test subjects. They said weak bodies for dangerous missions that no alien wanted to take. Ethan's stomach twisted. He forced himself to keep walking, trying to mask the storm that had erupted inside his head. When he reached his assigned quarters, the room was bare. A single metal bed and a small locker. The hum of the ship's engines vibrated through the walls, and he sat there for a long time, staring at the floor, his mind replaying the sneers, the laughter, and those final whispered words. He knew now that this wasn't just about proving himself in training. This was about survival, and there was something else. He couldn't shake the feeling that someone on this ship wanted him gone before he even had the chance to fight back. Ethan barely slept that night. The cold hum of the ship's walls pressing against his ears like a warning. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those glowing alien eyes staring at him, waiting for him to fail by morning. A sharp voice over the intercom summoned all recruits to the launch bay. He arrived to find the Zorath soldiers already assembled, their posture perfect, their armor glinting under the harsh white lights. The commander stood before them, tall and still, his deep voice cutting through the air as he announced the day's challenge. A training mission through the Ralvec asteroid run, a deadly field of spinning rocks and frozen debris that even seasoned Zorath pilots avoided. Ethan felt his throat tighten, but before he could process it, the commander's gaze landed on him and he ordered the human to pilot his own small craft through the course. While the others observed from the safety of the control deck, the aliens exchanged smirks, their laughter low but sharp as they began making bets on how quickly his ship would be torn apart. Ethan stepped into the fighter, a sleek black craft that smelled faintly of ozone and burned metal. He slid into the pilot's seat, running his hands over controls that felt alive, their surfaces shifting slightly under his touch. Moment! The engines roared to life. A strange flicker ran across the dashboard for half a second. A panel went dark, then returned to normal. Ethan frowned but had no time to investigate as the bay doors opened and the black sea of space stretched. Out before him, the asteroid field loomed ahead, massive chunks of rock tumbling and colliding in slow, deadly motion. He gripped the controls the way he used to hold a wrench in his mechanic shop back in Texas, firm but not too tight. The first few minutes were chaos, his reflexes struggling to match the erratic movements of the debris shards of ice and stone spinning past so close he could hear them scrape the hull. He jerked the craft hard to the left, narrowly avoiding a boulder the size of a house. Alarms wailed, but he kept going. The controls began to glitch, more panels dimming the targeting system, freezing for seconds at a time. Ethan's pulse raced, sweat dripping down his temple. It was sabotage, it had to be. He thought of those whispered words yesterday, test subjects, expendable tools. This was not a training run, it was an execution. He forced himself to breathe, remembering the dozens of times back on Earth he had kept broken engines running with nothing but duct tape. And stubbornness reaching into a side compartment, he pulled out the small multi-tool he had smuggled from home, with one hand steadying the ship. He leaned under the console, sparks biting at his knuckles as he stripped a cable and reconnected it to a different port. The screens flickered back to life, just in time for him to dodge a jagged shard of asteroid that tore past where his cockpit had been. Seconds earlier, adrenaline surged through him as the ship responded faster now, almost like it wanted to live too. The final stretch of the run was a narrow gap between two massive rotating rocks. He timed his move perfectly, slipping through just as they slammed together behind him. The sudden quiet of open space hit him like a wave, and he realized he had made it alive as the ship docked back in the bay. The aliens stared, their smirks gone, replaced by unreadable expressions. The commander stepped forward slowly, his glowing eyes fixed on Ethan, his voice low but clear, saying, "You weren't supposed to return alive?" Ethan met his gaze but said nothing. Instead, he brushed past him, walking back toward the quarters, his mind boiling with questions. Why bring him aboard if they wanted him dead? Why risk the ship's resources to run a test like this? He was halfway down the corridor when he noticed strange black markings along the inside of his shuttle's hatch. They weren't scratches. They were deliberate symbols carved deep into the metal. He traced a finger over them and felt a faint vibration like a heartbeat. The hair on the back of his neck rose. This was more than just Zorath cruelty. Someone or something else was moving in the shadows of this ship, and he had a feeling he was already tangled in it deeper than he could imagine. Ethan couldn't shake the strange vibration from his fingers. All through the night, the black markings on the shuttle burned in his mind like a puzzle he wasn't supposed to see by morning. The ship's artificial daylight flooded the corridors, and an announcement ordered all human recruits to report to Briefing Room 12. He followed the metallic hallways, his footsteps echoing until he entered a dim chamber where a massive screen glowed with an image that made his breath catch it. It wasn't the Zorath homeworld or a training simulation. It was a fleet of monstrous ships, their jagged forms glinting in a cold light, each vessel shaped like a living creature with long spines and twisting limbs. The commander's voice was heavy, as he named them the Varric, a species from the edge of the galaxy older than the Zorath. and feared by all races. They were silent invaders, their ships alive, feeding on the energy of planets until nothing remained. Ethan listened as the commander spoke of an approaching war and how the Zorath elite forces would lead the defense. Then came the part that turned his stomach. The humans would be the first to confront the enemy. They would be sent ahead as scouts to gather intelligence, a mission so dangerous that survival was unlikely. Ethan's chest tightened. He scanned the room, seeing the other human recruits nodding nervously. Most didn't understand they were being thrown into the mouth of death without even knowing why. As the briefing ended, the commander's cold eyes lingered on him, longer than on anyone else. The recruits filed out. But one figure remained near the back, a tall Zorath soldier with deep silver patterns on her armor. She stepped forward, her eyes dimmer than the others and her voice quieter. She introduced herself as Sarikel and without preamble told him not to go on the scout mission. She said the Varric destroyed every ship they touched and that the Zorath were using humans as expendable bait to learn the enemy's patterns. Ethan stared at her, unsure whether to trust her. Her words were fast, urgent, and full of warning. She told him she had seen the markings on his shuttle before, that they were not Zorath. They were Varric, a sign that something from the enemy had already touched their ship. His mind spun the sabotage, the near-death run through the asteroids now. This, if the Varric could leave their mark inside the Zorath flagship, then they were closer than anyone thought. Ethan asked why. She was telling him this, and she hesitated, saying that not all Zorath agreed with the commander's hatred of humans. Some remembered the old alliances from centuries ago before the galaxy fractured. She pressed something into his hand, a small, triangular device no bigger than a coin, and told him to keep it hidden, saying it might be the only thing that could keep him alive when the mission came. Then she was gone. Leaving only the hum of the corridor in her place, he returned to his quarters, turning the device over in his fingers. Its surface smooth but somehow warm, like it was alive hours later. As he sat on his bed, the room's comm screen flickered to life without warning, static filling the air before a voice broke through. It was a voice. He knew a voice that made his blood run cold. His sister Leah. Her image was shaky, her hair damp as if she had been running. She spoke quickly, her words urgent, saying, "Ethan, they're lying to you and they've lied to us too." She said Zorath had struck a deal with the Varric, trading human lives for time to prepare their own worlds. She tried to say more, but the signal broke, her image twisting into static. Ethan's heart pounded. He stepped toward the screen, but it went black, and silent he stood there frozen. His breath loud in the small room, the words echoing in his head. The walls seemed closer now, the air heavier. He realized he was trapped between two enemies, and both might be watching him already. Ethan paced the narrow confines of his quarters, his sister's broken warning still ringing in his ears. Every instinct told him to act. But the moment he stepped into the hallway, two Zorath guards blocked his path, their tall frames casting long shadows over the metal floor. Without a word, they seized his arms, their grip like iron, and dragged him through the cold, twisting corridors. His protests were ignored. The only sound was the steady thud of their boots until they reached a heavy black door that slid open with a hiss. The room beyond was bare except for a single chair in the center. They shoved him into it, and the door sealed with a deep metallic clang. Moments later, the commander stepped in, his glowing eyes fixed on Ethan with quiet fury. Accused Ethan of tampering with ship systems during the asteroid run and of speaking to unauthorized crew members like Sarikel. Ethan started to deny it, but the commander's hand shot out, grabbing the front of his uniform, lifting him slightly. From the chair, the commander leaned close, his voice a low growl telling Ethan he was here because the Zorath allowed it, and that could change in an instant. Then he dropped him and turned to leave, ordering the guards to keep him here until the scout mission launched. The door sealed again and the lights dimmed, leaving Ethan in a cold half-darkness. Hours passed, or maybe longer time, felt strange in the hum of the walls. His thoughts raced between his sister's message, the sabotage, the strange markings, and Sarikel's warning. He felt the small triangular device in his pocket, its surface still warm as if it somehow knew he needed it. Then a faint metallic tap echoed from the far wall. Ethan froze, listening. The sound came again, followed by a whisper in a voice he recognized, Sari Kel, telling him to move back from the wall. He did, and a narrow panel slid open, revealing her face in the dim light. She told him there was no time to explain she had disabled the cell's surveillance. For only a few seconds, and he had to follow her. Now they moved quickly through maintenance tunnels, low and cramped, their footsteps muffled by layers of piping. The ship's deeper machinery thrummed around them like a giant sleeping beast. Sari Kel explained as they crawled that she had discovered encrypted orders from the commander to abandon the human scouts mid-mission, letting the Varric destroy them before the Zorath made their real strike. She said some Zorath officers feared the Varric, so much they were willing to let them wipe out entire species if it bought them more time to prepare their own worlds. Ethan asked about the markings on his shuttle, and she told him the truth made her skin crawl. They were not just signs, they were fragments left by the Varric, a kind of living code that could infect technology and spread like a virus. She believed it meant the enemy already had eyes and ears inside the ship. They reached a hatch, and Sari Kel led him into a small hidden control room, screens flickering with streams of alien symbols. She tapped at one display, and the symbols shifted into images, showing the Varric's attack records. Planets stripped to black husks, ships torn open in silence. The sight made Ethan's chest feel hollow. She pulled up a secure map showing the scout mission route. It led straight into the largest concentration of Varric ships. Ethan's jaw tightened as he realized it was a death sentence. Sari Kel handed him a small chip, saying, it was a copy of the commander's orders, proof that could turn the crew against him if shown at the right time. But before he could take it, alarms blared, red lights flashing across the panels, and the commander's voice thundered over the intercom, announcing the human had escaped and all units were ordered to terminate on sight. Sari Kel's eyes hardened as she shoved the chip into his hand, telling him to run and find a ship while she covered him. Heavy footsteps echoed in the distance. Growing closer, the walls seemed to close in as Ethan darted into the next tunnel, gripping the chip so tightly it dug into his palm, knowing the next few minutes could decide whether he lived or was erased from the galaxy without a trace. Ethan ran through the narrow tunnel, his breath coming in sharp bursts, the red warning lights chasing him like blood through the metal veins of the ship. Every junction seemed the same, but he trusted the faint arrows Sari Kel had carved into. The walls, earlier small scratches that caught the light just enough to guide him. The sound of boots echoed somewhere behind him. Metallic and fast, the Zorath guards were closing in. He clutched the chip in one hand, the triangular device in the other, not sure which was more valuable or which might save him. First, he reached a vertical shaft and climbed quickly, his fingers burning as they gripped the cold rungs above him. The hum of the ship grew louder as he neared the launch bay. He pulled himself onto a narrow catwalk that overlooked rows of sleek fighter crafts, their black hulls gleaming under white floodlights. Zorath pilots moved quickly below, preparing for battle. The intercom blared orders about an incoming Varric fleet wave. Approaching at high speed, there was no more time to plan. Ethan spotted a small fighter at the far edge of the bay, its hatch open, its systems running as if waiting for a pilot. He slid down a ladder and sprinted toward it, keeping low behind stacks of cargo crates. A guard turned just as Ethan reached the craft. Their eyes met for a single tense second, then Ethan shoved him aside and jumped into the cockpit, his hands flying over the controls. The systems were in Zorath language, but he remembered. Enough from training to activate the launch sequence engines roaring to life. The bay's magnetic locks released and the fighter shot into the black void of space. The stars stretched out before him, but there was no relief ahead. Loomed the Varric. Fleet their ships like enormous black insects, crawling against the backdrop of distant suns, spines glinting with cold light. Some moved with eerie slowness. Others darted like predators closing in on prey. The Zorath fleet surged forward, unleashing. Streams of blue energy fire. The void erupted with flashes and shadows. Ethan's calm crackled to life, Sari Kell's voice breaking through telling him she had managed to get a few more humans into fighters, and they were heading his way moments. Later, 3 small crafts flanked him, human recruits piloting them, their voices tense but steady as they formed a tight wing. The Varric moved faster than anything Ethan had faced before, their ships twisting unnaturally as if ignoring the laws of physics. One broke from the swarm, diving toward Ethan's group. He yanked his fighter into a hard roll, the others following just in time to avoid a burst of glowing green fire that burned through the darkness. They returned fire their shots, scattering off the Varric's black hull like sparks on stone. Ethan remembered the triangular device in his pocket. Sari Kell had said it might keep him alive. He slammed it into the auxiliary port, and suddenly his targeting system shifted strange. Symbols scrolling across the screen, locking onto the Varric in ways the standard system never could. He fired, and to his shock, the blast punched through the enemy ship's hull. It shuddered and broke apart in a silent burst. The other humans shouted in surprise over the calm, but there was no time to celebrate. The Zorath flagship's voice cut into the channel, ordering all human crafts to break formation and dive deeper into enemy lines, drawing Varric fire away from the main fleet. Ethan realized instantly what this was: the suicide plan in motion. He ignored the order, keeping his formation tight. The commander's voice grew colder, telling him to obey and die with honor. Ethan's grip tightened on the controls, his heart pounding as he stared. At the swarm ahead, he knew there was no honor in being used as bait, and if they followed orders, they would never see Earth again. His voice came sharp over the comm, telling the humans to follow him instead, not into death, but into the Varrics. Blind spot where their formation was weakest. It was a gamble, but better than waiting for the end. They dove together, engines screaming, cutting across the enemy lines and straight toward the largest Varric ship in sight, the one that seemed to be directing the others as it turned to face them. Ethan felt the air in his lungs freeze, knowing they were about to find out if the risk would save them or destroy them. In an instant, Ethan's fighter sliced through the void, the massive Varric command ship, looming larger with every second, its black surface alive with shifting patterns like the skin of some ancient deep-sea creature. The smaller Varric vessels moved to intercept their insect-like bodies twisting unnaturally in space. But Ethan's formation held tight, the humans flying in perfect unspoken coordination. Green fire streaked past their hulls, close enough to light the cockpits. In eerie flashes, Ethan's targeting screen pulsed with alien symbols from the triangular device guiding, his aim toward weak points invisible to normal sensors. He fired twin bursts of energy into a smaller escort craft, and it split apart in a silent shimmer of fragments. 2 other humans took out another clearing, a narrow gap straight toward the heart of the swarm. The Zorath flagship's voice crackled angrily into the comm, ordering him again to fall back. But Ethan ignored it, his voice sharp as he told the others to focus on the command ship. If they cut off its control, the swarm might break. The Varric ships closed in from both sides, the space between them turning into a deadly cage. One human fighter was clipped by enemy fire, spinning out into the black. Ethan's jaw clenched, but he pushed forward, activating every ounce of speed the craft had. The enemy ship filled his view. Now a sprawling fortress of dark metal and glowing veins, Sari Kell's voice came through static, telling him to get close enough to deploy the device into its hull. She said it wasn't just a tracker. It was a weapon designed to disrupt Varric neural links for a short window, giving them a chance to strike without retaliation. Ethan dove low, skimming the jagged spines of the enemy hull. Alarms screamed in his ears as the shields struggled to hold. He swerved past a line of rotating turrets, their fire cutting the darkness into shards. The other humans covered him, blasting away, pursuing ships. One peeled off to draw a cluster of enemies into chasing them away from the target. Ethan reached a narrow vent, glowing faintly with green light exactly where the targeting symbols pointed. He released the device. It locked onto the metal surface with a soundless pulse. Its light sinking into the alien material, a ripple spread across the ship's skin like a shockwave, and suddenly the Varric fleet faltered their movements. Jerky, uncoordinated, the swarm formation broke. Ethan shouted for the humans to hit every exposed weak point they could see. Energy bursts lit the void as ships shattered one after another. The Zorath fleet moved in, striking hard. Now that the enemy had lost its rhythm, the Varric began to retreat, fading into the dark like shadows dissolving in light. Ethan's chest heaved as the immediate danger faded, but the comms were far from quiet. The Zorath commander's voice returned no longer cold but sharp with forced authority, announcing that the humans' reckless act had saved the fleet. Ethan felt the bitterness in the words. This was no praise. Just an attempt to control the story. Back on the flagship, the humans were ordered to disarm and return for debrief. But as Ethan's fighter docked, the bay was silent. The Zorath soldiers who had once laughed at him now stood in rigid lines there, glowing eyes fixed on him. No smirks, no mockery, just an unspoken acknowledgement of what he had done. The commander stepped forward, but before he could speak, Sari Kell appeared beside Ethan, holding up the chip containing the commander's betrayal. Orders, her voice rang through the bay for all to hear as she revealed how the humans had been meant to die. The crew's murmurs swelled into sharp, angry tones. The commander's expression froze, his authority crumbling under the weight of the truth. Zorath guards moved in, but not toward Ethan, toward the commander, who was led away in silence. Sari Kell turned to Ethan, telling him the fleet would now have to see humans as allies, not bait the bay, began to return to its work, the hum of ships rising again. But Ethan's eyes drifted to the vast viewport beyond the hangar doors in the distance. Like faint scratches on the dark, hundreds of new shapes were emerging from hyperspace, the patterns on their hulls twisting like living shadows. His hands curled into fists as he whispered almost to himself, "Round two's coming, and this time they won't be laughing at us anymore."